Imagine for a moment that you are standing at the edge of a vast, dark canyon. On the other side, just visible through the mist, is everything you have ever wanted. It is the career that makes you jump out of bed in the morning, the financial freedom to never check your bank balance before a meal, the relationships that feel like a warm hearth on a cold night, and the version of yourself that is strong, confident, and whole. But between you and that reality lies a terrifying drop. You've tried to build bridges before. You've tried to jump. And every single time, you ended up at the bottom, bruised, exhausted, and feeling like the world was laughing at your efforts. We have all been there. We have all felt that cold, sinking sensation in the pit of our stomach when a project fails, a relationship ends, or a personal goal slips through our fingers like sand. We live in a world that is obsessed with the highlight reel, a culture that treats success as an inevitable destination for the talented and failure as a permanent brand on the foreheads of the weak. But what if everything you've been told about losing is a lie? What if the very thing you are running away from, the sting of defeat, is actually the only fuel powerful enough to get you to the other side of that canyon? Today, here at the Universe of Book, we are going to stop running. We are going to dive deep into a philosophy that doesn't just promise success, but redefines what it means to struggle. We are exploring the transformative wisdom of Martin Meadows in his seminal work, From Failure to Success. This isn't a book of empty platitudes or just believe in yourself posters. This is a tactical manual for the soul. It is for the person who is tired of starting over, for the entrepreneur who has seen their dreams go up in smoke, and for anyone who feels like they are stuck in a loop of almost but not quite. By the time we finish this journey together, you won't just understand why you failed. You will know exactly how to use those failures as the bricks for your future empire. Before we peel back the layers of these lessons, we have to talk about the man behind the words. Martin Meadows isn't your typical motivational guru who was born with a silver spoon and a perfect smile. He is a man who built his entire career on the foundation of self-discipline and, more importantly, the honest admission of his own shortcomings. Martin spent years in the trenches of self-improvement, testing every theory on himself before ever sharing it with the world. He wrote this book because he realized that most people don't fail because they lack talent or resources. They fail because they have a dysfunctional relationship with failure itself. He saw a world of people paralyzed by the fear of looking stupid or the pain of being wrong. Martin's journey is one of radical honesty. He realized that the only difference between the person who succeeds and the person who gives up is their internal narrative. He understood that our brains are biologically wired to avoid pain, and in the modern world, failure is interpreted by our nervous system as a threat to our survival. His work is a bridge between the cold, hard facts of human psychology and the messy reality of daily life. He doesn't just want you to feel good. He wants you to become resilient. He wants to turn you into the kind of person who can take a hit, look at the bruise, and see a lesson instead of a scar. To truly begin, we have to dismantle the biggest myth of the 21st century, the idea that failure is the opposite of success. In the mind of the average person, these two things are at opposite ends of a spectrum. You are either winning or you are losing. But Meadows argues that this is like saying the road is the opposite of the destination. You cannot reach the destination without the road. Success and failure are actually part of the same process. Think of a scientist in a lab. If they run an experiment and it doesn't work, do they go home and cry? Do they tell their family they are a loser? No. They look at the data. They say, interesting. This combination of chemicals didn't produce the result I wanted. Now I know one more way that doesn't work. That is the scientific method of living. Every time you fail, you are simply gathering data. You are narrowing down the possibilities until only the truth remains. The problem is that most of us take failure personally. We don't say the business failed. We say, I am a failure. We don't say this approach didn't work. We say, I'm not good enough. This internal shift, moving from an identity-based view of failure to a data-based view, is the first step toward true freedom. Imagine how much more aggressive you would be in pursuing your dreams if you knew that losing was just a necessary part of the research and development phase of your life. When we look at the psychological landscape of success, we have to talk about the failure-success spectrum. Meadows suggests that most people live in a state of comfortable stagnation. They aren't failing because they aren't even trying anything hard enough to fail at. They are playing it safe. But the person who is actively failing is actually closer to success than the person who is doing nothing. Why? Because the person who is failing is in the arena. They are learning the texture of the challenge. They are building the calluses necessary to handle the weight of great achievement. Think about a toddler learning to walk. They fall down dozens, maybe hundreds of times. They bump their heads, they scrape their knees, they wobble and collapse. But have you ever seen a toddler just give up and decide that walking isn't for them? Have you ever seen a child think, maybe I'm just not a walker? Of course not. They don't have the ego yet to feel embarrassed. They only have the biological drive to move forward. As adults, we lose that. We become so concerned with our social standing and our self-image that we stop the very process, trial and error, that allows us to grow. Meadows urges us to reclaim that toddler-like resilience, to stop looking at our stumbles as evidence of our inadequacy and start seeing them as evidence of our courage. One of the most profound insights Meadows offers is the concept of the fixed versus the growth mindset, a concept popularized by Carol Dweck, but applied here with a specific focus on the sting of defeat. A person with a fixed mindset believes that their abilities are set in stone. They think they have a certain amount of intelligence, a certain amount of talent, and a certain amount of luck. To them, failure is a terrifying revelation that they don't have what it takes. If they fail, it means they've hit their ceiling, and that's a scary thought. So, they avoid challenges. They stay in their comfort zone. But a person with a growth mindset understands that the human brain is incredibly plastic. They know that every time they struggle, their brain is actually forming new neural pathways. They see failure as a form of resistance training for the mind. Just like you have to tear muscle fibers in the gym for them to grow back stronger, you have to tear your ego and your current understanding of the world for your wisdom to expand. When you shift to a growth mindset, you stop asking, "Can I do this?" and you start asking, "How can I learn to do this?" The failure is no longer a wall, it's a staircase. But let's get practical for a moment, because it's one thing to talk about mindset and another to deal with the actual, physical pain of losing. Meadows discusses the valley of despair. This is that middle ground in any journey where the initial excitement has worn off, and you are faced with the grueling reality of hard work. This is where most people quit. When you start a new diet, the first 3 days are easy because you're inspired. By day 14, you're hungry, you're tired, and the scale hasn't moved as much as you hoped. This is the moment of truth. Most people see this lack of immediate progress as a failure, and they abandon the ship. But Meadows explains that this plateau is actually where the real work happens. It's where your discipline is tested. Success is often just the ability to survive the boring, painful, and unrewarding middle section of a project. If you can change your expectation of how the journey will look, if you stop expecting a straight line upward and start expecting a jagged path with long stretches of nothing happening, you become invincible. You realize that nothing is actually the period where the foundation is being poured. You can't see the building yet, but the ground is being prepared to hold the weight of your future. This feeling of being stuck, of working day in and day out without seeing a single spark of progress, is often the exact point where your old self dies and your successful self is born. Martin Meadows emphasizes that the biggest enemy of long-term achievement isn't a lack of talent. It's the weight of unrealistic expectations. We have been conditioned by a world of overnight successes to believe that if we don't see results quickly, we must be doing something wrong. But think about the Chinese bamboo tree. For 4 years, you water it, you weed the soil, and you protect it from the elements, yet you see absolutely nothing. Not a single green shoot breaks the surface of the earth. To an outsider, it looks like you are watering a patch of dirt. It looks like a failure. But in the 5th year, in a miraculous burst of life, that bamboo tree grows 80 feet tall in just 6 weeks. The question is, Did it grow 80 feet in 6 weeks? Or did it grow 80 feet in 5 years? The answer is 5 years. If at any point during those 4 invisible years you had stopped watering it, the tree would have died in the ground. Your success is exactly like that bamboo. Just because you can't see the growth doesn't mean it isn't happening underground. Your roots are deepening. Your character is strengthening. You are becoming the person who is capable of sustaining 80 feet of growth when the time finally comes. The pain of failure is often compounded by our social environment. We live in an era of public performance, where every win is posted to social media and every loss is hidden in the shadows. This creates a distorted reality where we feel like the only one struggling. Meadows points out that this fear of judgment is a primary reason why people give up too early. We aren't just afraid of failing. We are afraid of people seeing us fail. We worry about the whispers of friends, the "I told you so" from family, or the silent pity of colleagues. But here is the radical truth. Most people are so worried about their own failures and their own image that they aren't even thinking about yours. And more importantly, the people whose opinions actually matter, the ones who have achieved great things, will never judge you for failing. They will only respect you for trying, because they know exactly how much blood, sweat, and tears are required to get off the floor. The only people who mock those who fail are the ones who are too afraid to even step onto the field. When you realize that judgment is just a reflection of the critic's own insecurity, it loses its power over you. You become free to fail loudly, to fail often, and to fail forward. To navigate this journey, we have to talk about the concept of strategic quitting. Now, this might sound counterintuitive. We've been told our whole lives that quitters never win and winners never quit. But Martin Meadows challenges this simplistic view. He argues that knowing when to quit is actually a superpower of the successful. One of the most practical tools Meadows introduces for managing the fear of failure is the premortem. Most of us are familiar with a postmortem, the analysis that happens after something has died or failed. But a premortem is a proactive psychological exercise. Before you start a new project or set a new goal, you sit down and imagine that it is 1 year in the future and you have failed spectacularly. Everything went wrong. You lost the money, you lost the time, and you are back at square one. Then, you ask yourself, why did it happen? By visualizing the failure before it occurs, you strip away its power to surprise you. You identify the potential pitfalls. Maybe it was a lack of discipline, maybe it was a lack of market research, or maybe it was a specific habit. Once you identify these reasons for failure in your imagination, you can build systems to prevent them in reality. It's like stress testing a bridge before you ever drive a car across it. This doesn't make you a pessimist. It makes you a professional. It allows you to enter the arena with your eyes wide open, having already made peace with the worst-case scenario. This leads us to the bedrock of Martin Meadows' philosophy, the relationship between failure and self-discipline. Most people think discipline is something you either have or you don't, like blue eyes or a tall frame. But Meadows shows us that discipline is a muscle that is built through the very process of failing and restarting. Every time you set an alarm for 5 a.m. and you actually get up, you are winning a small battle. But every time you hit snooze and then forgive yourself and try again the next day, you are building something even more important: resilience. Failure is the ultimate test of discipline. It is easy to be disciplined when everything is going well, when the money is coming in and the praise is high. But can you be disciplined when you've just been rejected? Can you keep your routine when you feel like a fool? This is where the champions are made. The ability to maintain your habits in the face of defeat is the unfair advantage that will eventually lead you to the top. Success is nothing more than a series of boring, disciplined days that eventually compound into something extraordinary. We also have to address the emotional hangover of failure. When we lose, our bodies actually go through a physiological response similar to physical pain. Our cortisol levels spike, our heart rate increases, and our brain's threat detection center, the amygdala, goes into overdrive. This is why failure feels so heavy. It's not just in your head, it's in your blood. Meadows suggests that the key to moving past this is radical self-compassion. This isn't about making excuses. It's about treating yourself with the same kindness you would offer a best friend. If your friend failed at something, would you call them a worthless loser? Would you tell them they should just give up because they'll never be good enough? Of course not. You would offer them a hand, remind them of their strengths, and help them look for the lesson. Yet, we are often our own harshest critics. We speak to ourselves in ways we would never tolerate from another human being. This internal cruelty doesn't motivate us. It paralyzes us. It makes the cost of failure so high that we stop taking risks. By practicing self-compassion, you lower the emotional stakes of failing. You make it safe to try again. You realize that your value as a human being is not tied to your output or your achievements. You are inherently valuable, and failure is just something that happened to you. It is not who you are. This brings us to a critical distinction that many people miss: the difference between persistence and insistence. We are often told to never give up, but Martin Meadows adds a necessary layer of nuance to this advice. Persistence is staying committed to your ultimate vision, your why, and your long-term goal. Insistence, on the other hand, is staying stubbornly attached to a specific method or tactic even when it is clearly not working. Think of it like a traveler trying to cross a mountain range. Persistence is the unwavering determination to reach the valley on the other side. Insistence is trying to walk through a solid rock wall because that's the path you initially chose. A persistent person will see the wall, realize they can't walk through it, and look for a pass, a tunnel, or a way around. They are flexible in their approach, but rigid in their goal. Most people fail because they get these two mixed up. They give up on their dreams, the goal, because they were too insistent on a specific plan, the method, that failed. To succeed, you must be like water, flowing around obstacles, changing shape when necessary, but always moving toward the ocean. To navigate this, we must embrace the concept of antifragility. This is a term popularized by Nassim Taleb, but Meadows applies it beautifully to the journey of self-improvement. Most things in the world are either fragile or robust. Something fragile, like a glass vase, breaks when it is dropped. Something robust, like a steel bar, stays the same when it is dropped. But something anti-fragile actually gets stronger when it is dropped. Think of your own body. If you sit on a couch for 10 years, your bones and muscles become fragile. They wither away. But if you subject them to the failure of heavy weights in the gym, literally tearing the muscle fibers and putting stress on the bone, they grow back denser and more powerful. You are designed to be anti-fragile. Your character, your business, and your mind thrive on a certain level of chaos and challenge. When you experience a setback, you shouldn't just aim to get back to normal. You should aim to be better because of the struggle. The failure is this stressor that forces you to evolve. If your life is too comfortable, you are actually at your most vulnerable because you aren't building any anti-fragile tissue. You are like a hothouse flower that will wilt at the first sign of a breeze. By seeking out challenges and accepting the risk of failure, you are toughening up your soul for the inevitable storms of life. This leads us to the trap of the comfort zone. Meadows argues that the most dangerous place in the world is not the edge of a cliff, but the warmth of a comfortable sofa. We often avoid failure because it's uncomfortable, but in doing so, we commit ourselves to a slow, silent decay. Growth and comfort cannot coexist. They are like fire and ice. To move toward success, you must become comfortable with being uncomfortable. You must learn to crave the sting of the new and the unknown. Imagine you are learning a new language. If you only talk to people who speak your native tongue, you are comfortable, but you aren't learning. It's only when you step into a conversation where you don't know the words, where you stumble over your grammar and feel like an idiot, that your brain actually starts to acquire the language. That feeling of feeling like an idiot is the physical sensation of your brain growing. If you aren't feeling that at least once a week, you aren't growing. You are just repeating what you already know. But how do we handle the sheer exhaustion that comes with constant effort? This is where the power of micro wins comes into play. When we are recovering from a major failure, our confidence is usually in the gutter. We feel like we can't do anything right. In these moments, Meadows suggests we stop looking at the mountain peak and start looking at our feet. We need micro wins to rebuild our belief in ourselves. A micro win is something so small it's almost impossible to fail at. It could be drinking one glass of water, writing one sentence of your book, or making one sales call. These small victories might seem insignificant, but they are doing something profound. They are retraining your brain to associate your actions with success. Each micro win is a vote for the person you want to become. Over time, these small wins accumulate. They create a success spiral that pulls you out of the depths of depression and back into the light of productivity. You don't build a wall by trying to build a wall. You build a wall by laying one brick as perfectly as a brick can be laid every single day. Meadows also spends significant time discussing the environment of success. Many people think that failure is a result of a weak will, but willpower is a finite resource. It's like a battery that drains throughout the day. If you have to use all your willpower just to avoid distractions, you won't have any left to deal with a real crisis. The most successful people don't have more willpower than you. They just have better environments. They design their lives so that failure is harder and success is easier. If you are trying to lose weight, don't keep junk food in the house. If you are trying to write a book, leave your phone in another room. By friction-proofing your life, you save your energy for the big battles. You want to make the right choice, the easy choice. This is tactical living. It's about being the architect of your surroundings rather than the victim of them. When you fail, don't just blame your character. Look at your environment. Did you set yourself up for failure? Did you leave the door open for temptation? Changing your surroundings is often much faster and more effective than trying to change your personality. Another pillar of Meadows' teaching is the probability of success. We often look at success as a 50-50 shot. Either it happens or it doesn't. But in reality, success is a numbers game. Imagine you are throwing a 20-sided die. You only need to hit a 20 to win. If you only throw the die once, your chances are low. You might walk away saying, "I'm just not lucky." But if you throw that die 1,000 times, it is statistically inevitable that you will eventually hit a 20. Failure is simply a non-20 roll. It doesn't mean the die is broken, and it doesn't mean you are a bad roller. It just means you haven't thrown it enough times yet. The secret to success is to increase your surface area for luck by taking more shots. The more times you fail, the higher the mathematical probability that you are nearing a win. Every no you receive in sales, every rejected manuscript, every failed prototype is just a roll of the die that didn't hit the number. Instead of being discouraged by a no, you should be excited because you are now one roll closer to the yes. This shift in perspective from an emotional one to a mathematical one is incredibly liberating. It removes the ego from the equation. If success is a matter of probability, then your only job is to stay in the game long enough for the numbers to work in your favor. This is why burning out is so dangerous. Burnout is the only way you truly lose because it takes you out of the game. If you stop throwing the die, your probability of winning drops to zero. This is why Meadows emphasizes self-care and sustainable pacing. You aren't in a sprint. You are in a lifelong marathon. If you run so hard in the first mile that you collapse, you've failed. But if you jog at a steady pace, accepting that some miles will be harder than others, you will eventually cross the finish line. As we continue to roll that die, we eventually run into one of the most seductive and dangerous traps on the road to success: the golden cage of perfectionism. Many of us wear our perfectionism like a badge of honor. We tell interviewers it's our greatest weakness, while secretly believing it's our greatest strength. But Martin Meadows pulls the mask off this delusion. Perfectionism isn't about high standards. It's about a deep-seated, paralyzing fear of being seen as less than. It is the ultimate shield against failure. Think about it. If you never launch the business because the logo isn't quite right, or if you never hit publish on the video because the lighting is slightly off, you haven't technically failed. You've just delayed. But in reality, a delay driven by fear is the most certain form of failure there is. Perfectionism is just procrastination in a tuxedo. It keeps you safe in your room, tinkering with details that don't matter while the world passes you by. Meadows teaches us that done is better than perfect. The person who launches a good enough product and fails has gained 10 times more experience than the person who spent 3 years trying to build a perfect one that never saw the light of day. To break free from this, you have to embrace the sloppy start. You have to give yourself permission to be a beginner. You have to be willing to produce garbage in the beginning, because garbage is the fertilizer that allows the garden to eventually grow. When we do finally step out and experience a setback, the most important thing we can do, and the thing most of us avoid, is a failure audit. Most people, when they hit a wall, either try to ignore it and move on immediately, or they sit and wallow in the pain. Neither of these approaches works. Instead, you must become an investigator of your own life. Imagine you are a detective at a crime scene. You aren't there to judge the victim or the perpetrator. You are there to collect evidence. You need to perform an autopsy on your failure. Meadows suggests asking yourself cold, hard questions. Was this a failure of strategy? A failure of execution? Or was it an intelligent failure where you did everything right, but the external conditions simply weren't in your favor? This distinction is life-changing. If you failed because you didn't work hard enough, the solution is discipline. If you failed because your strategy was wrong, the solution is education. But if it was an intelligent failure, the kind where you took a calculated risk and it just didn't pan out, then the only solution is to hold your head high and try again. By auditing your failures, you turn a painful experience into a valuable asset. You are essentially buying wisdom with the currency of your struggle. This brings us to the core engine of transformation, the difference between motivation and self-discipline. We live in a culture that worships motivation. We watch hype videos, we listen to upbeat music, and we wait for that spark to get us moving. But Meadows is very clear. Motivation is a feeling, and feelings are as fickle as the weather. If you only work when you are motivated, you are a slave to your moods. Success, however, requires you to be the master of your actions. Self-discipline is the ability to do what needs to be done, even when you hate the idea of doing it. It is the bridge between goals and accomplishment. Think of motivation like the wind in a sail. It's great when it's blowing, but if the wind dies down, the boat stops. Self-discipline is the engine. It doesn't care if the wind is blowing or if the sun is out. It just keeps humming along, pushing you forward. When you fail, your motivation will almost certainly vanish. You will feel heavy, tired, and discouraged. That is the exact moment when your engine must kick in. You don't need to feel like a winner to act like one. You just need to follow the system you built when you were feeling strong. One of the psychological hurdles Meadows helps us clear is the sunk cost fallacy. This is the tendency to continue on a failing path simply because we've already invested so much time, money, or emotion into it. We've all been there, staying in a dead-end job because I've been here 5 years, or staying in a toxic relationship because we have so much history. In the context of failure, we often double down on a losing strategy because we don't want to waste our previous efforts. But Meadows reminds us that the time and money you've already spent are gone forever. They are sunk. The only question that matters is, what is the best use of my next hour, my next dollar, and my next ounce of energy? If you are on a sinking ship, staying on it won't bring back the time you spent boarding it. It will only cost you your future. Letting go of a failure isn't a waste. It's an investment in your next success. It's the ultimate act of self-respect to say, this didn't work, and I am wise enough to stop now. To truly build a failure immune system, Meadows introduces the concept of voluntary hardship. This is the practice of intentionally seeking out small, controlled doses of discomfort to toughen your mind. In our modern world, we are surrounded by convenience. We have climate control, instant entertainment, and food delivered to our doors. This makes us mentally soft. When a real failure hits, like a job loss or a health scare, we shatter because we have no practice dealing with adversity. Voluntary hardship is like a vaccine. By taking cold showers, fasting for a day, or pushing yourself to run an extra mile when you're tired, you are teaching your brain that discomfort is not a disaster. You are proving to yourself that you can handle pain and keep functioning. Then, when a real failure arrives, your brain doesn't panic. It says, "Okay, I felt worse than this. I know how to stay calm and find a solution." You are building a reservoir of resilience that you can draw from when the stakes are high. We must also look at the role of negative visualization. While many gurus tell you to only visualize success and vibrate with high energy, Meadows takes a more stoic approach. He suggests that we should occasionally visualize the worst-case scenario in vivid detail. Think about losing everything. Imagine your business failing, your car being repossessed, and having to start from zero. At first, this seems depressing. But something strange happens when you stare your demons in the face. They lose their power. You realize that even in the absolute worst-case scenario, you would still be you. You would still have your skills, your mind, and your character. You would survive. Most of our fear of failure is based on a vague, blurry monster in our heads. When you turn on the lights and look at the monster, you see it's just a shadow. By accepting that you can survive the worst, you become incredibly dangerous to your competition because you have nothing to lose. You become bold. You take the risks that others are too terrified to even consider. This boldness must be tempered with extreme ownership. This is a concept Meadows emphasizes throughout the book. When things go wrong, the human instinct is to look for a scapegoat. We blame the economy, our boss, our parents, or our bad luck. But the moment you blame an external factor, you give away your power. If the economy is the reason you failed, then you have to wait for the economy to change before you can succeed. You become a victim. But if you say, "I failed because I didn't adapt to the economy," then you are the solution. Ownership is the foundation of growth. It doesn't matter if it's 90% someone else's fault. You must focus on the 10% that was yours. That 10% is the only part you can change. By taking total responsibility for your failures, you grant yourself total authority over your future successes. But let's talk about a mistake that even the most dedicated seekers of success make: the obsession with goals. We are taught to be goal-oriented, to set smart goals, and to fixate on the finish line. But Martin Meadows introduces a perspective that might feel like a cold splash of water. Goals are fragile. A goal is a binary state. Either you've reached it and you're successful, or you haven't and you're failing. This creates a constant state of pre-success failure. If your goal is to lose 30 pounds and you've lost 29, you are technically still a failure in your own mind. This is an exhausting way to live. Instead, Meadows advocates for systems over goals. A system is a process you follow every day, regardless of the immediate result. If your goal is to write a book, your system is writing 500 words every morning. If you write your words, you have succeeded for the day. The beauty of a system is that it is failure-proof. Even if the book never gets published, the system of writing has made you a better writer. It has built the habit. It has shaped your identity. When you focus on the system, you fall in love with the climb rather than the peak. And ironically, it is the people who love the climb who eventually find themselves standing on the highest mountains. This leads us to the concept of the feedback loop. In many ways, your life is a massive, ongoing conversation with the universe. You take an action, the universe provides a reaction, and you interpret that reaction. Most people have a broken feedback loop. They take an action, get a negative result, and instead of using that result to adjust their course, they use it as an excuse to stop moving altogether. They interpret a no as a signal to quit, rather than a signal to change their pitch. Meadows teaches us that failure is the highest form of information. It is the most honest teacher you will ever have. Praise feels good, but it rarely teaches you anything new. Failure, however, shows you exactly where your weaknesses are. It points out the cracks in your armor. It tells you that your current strategy is insufficient for the level you are trying to reach. To close the feedback loop, you must become emotionally detached from the result. You must look at a failed project with the same clinical curiosity that a mechanic looks at a broken engine. You don't get mad at the engine. You just look for the part that isn't turning. When you view your life this way, you become a learning machine. You stop fearing the feedback because you realize that the faster you get the bad feedback, the faster you can make the corrections that lead to the good results. We also need to address a phenomenon that Meadows calls the curse of early success. Believe it or not, failing early in your journey is often a much greater gift than succeeding early. When you succeed right out of the gate, you often develop a false sense of security. You start to believe that you have the Midas touch, and you attribute your success to your innate talent rather than hard work or lucky timing. This makes you fragile. When the inevitable struggle finally arrives, and it always does, you won't have the mental tools to handle it. You'll be like a soldier who went into battle with a wooden sword because they'd never seen a real fight. But the person who fails repeatedly in the beginning is being forged in the fire. They are learning how to pivot, how to grit their teeth, and how to stay calm when everything is going wrong. By the time they finally achieve success, they are hardened. They know that success is something that must be maintained and defended, not just something they are entitled to. If you are struggling right now, if you feel like everyone else is getting ahead while you are stuck in the mud, remember, you are building a foundation that can support a skyscraper. Those who succeed too quickly often build on sand. Another heavy weight we carry is what Meadows refers to as social gravity. This is the invisible force exerted by the people around us. We like to think we are independent thinkers, but we are deeply influenced by our tribe. If you are surrounded by people who have a fixed mindset, people who complain about the economy, who mock those who try new things, and who view failure as a source of shame, it will be nearly impossible for you to adopt a failure to success mindset. They will pull you back down to their level, not out of malice, but out of their own fear of being left behind. Meadows suggests that you must be ruthless with your social environment. You don't necessarily have to cut everyone off, but you must find a counterbalance. You need to find people who have failed bigger than you have and kept going. You need to listen to their stories, read their biographies, and realize that the embarrassment you fear is actually a rite of passage among the elite. When you change your social circle, you change your normal. If everyone you know is taking risks and failing forward, then your own failures stop feeling like a catastrophe and start feeling like just another Tuesday. This brings us to the psychological concept of the gap and the gain. Most of us spend our lives focused on the gap, the distance between where we are now and where we want to be. We look at our bank accounts, our bodies, or our careers, and we see only what is missing. This creates a permanent sense of failure. No matter how much we achieve, there is always another gap ahead of us. Meadows encourages us to instead look at the gain, the distance between where we are now and where we started. When you face a major setback, it's easy to feel like you've lost everything. But if you look at the gain, you'll see that you are still miles ahead of the person you were 3 years ago. You have more knowledge, more resilience, and a better understanding of the world. Even if you lose your money, you haven't lost the capacity to make money. Even if your project fails, you haven't lost the skills you developed while building it. By focusing on the gain, you maintain your momentum. You realize that starting over isn't actually starting over. It's starting again with a massive head start. We must also talk about the physicality of resilience. Martin Meadows is a huge proponent of the idea that the mind and body are not separate entities. If your body is weak, your mind will be fragile. When you are chronically sleep-deprived, poorly nourished, and sedentary, your brain's ability to handle stress is severely compromised. A small failure that you would normally laugh off becomes a crushing emotional blow when your nervous system is frayed. Meadows argues that maintaining your physical health is a tactical requirement for success. Exercise isn't just about looking good in the mirror. It's about burning off the cortisol that failure creates. It's about proving to yourself every morning that you can do something hard. When you push through the pain of a final set in the gym, you are training your persistence muscle for your business. When you choose a healthy meal over junk food, you are practicing the delayed gratification necessary for financial success. Your body is the vehicle for your dreams. If the vehicle is broken, The driver isn't going anywhere, no matter how much willpower they have. As we go deeper into the mechanics of the book, we encounter the what-if transformation. Most of us use the words, what if, to torture ourselves. What if I fail? What if people laugh at me? What if I lose all my money? This is negative visualization used incorrectly. It leads to paralysis. Meadows suggests we flip the script and use what if as a tool for curiosity and strategy. What if this failure is exactly what I need to find a better way? What if this rejection is protecting me from a bigger mistake later on? What if the worst-case scenario happens and I discover I'm stronger than I thought? By changing the tone of your internal questions, you change the state of your brain. You move from the limbic system, the reactive, fearful part of the brain, to the prefrontal cortex, the logical, problem-solving part. You stop being a victim of your circumstances and start being a strategist of your life. This leads to the final practical pillar of the book, the art of reentry. After a massive failure, there is always a period of hibernation. You want to hide from the world, lick your wounds, and stay in bed. Meadows acknowledges that this is natural, but he warns against letting the hibernation become a permanent state. You need a reentry plan. This isn't about jumping back into the fire at full speed. It's about a gradual, disciplined return to the arena. You start with the micro wins we discussed earlier. You rebuild your routine. You reach out to one contact. You do 1 hour of work. The key is to move before you feel ready. If you wait until the fear is gone, you will be waiting forever. Action is the only cure for fear. The moment you take that first, small, shaky step back into the world, the failure starts to move into the past, and the process begins again. You are no longer someone who failed. You are once again someone who is trying. And that, in itself, is a victory. As we stand here at the end of this deep exploration, I want you to take a long, slow breath and look back at that dark canyon we imagined at the very beginning. Remember the mist, the fear, and the paralyzing thought that you might not be enough? Look again. The canyon hasn't changed, but you have. You now realize that the drop isn't a death sentence. It's a training ground. The bridge across isn't built of luck or born talent. It's built of every rejection letter you've ever received, every business that didn't take off, every morning you didn't want to get out of bed, but did anyway, and every time you were brave enough to be a beginner in a world that demands you be an expert. This is the ultimate secret that Martin Meadows wants you to carry in your heart. Success is not a trophy you win. It is the person you become while you are refusing to give up. The money, the status, and the accolades are just the side effects of a resilient soul. If you lost everything tomorrow, if the economy crashed, if your current project vanished, you would still be the person who knows how to survive, how to pivot, and how to build again. That internal strength is the only true security in this world. You are no longer afraid of failure because you have seen its face and you realize it is not a monster. It is a mirror, showing you exactly what you need to fix to get to the next level. I want to challenge you right now, in this moment of reflection. Don't let this be just another video you watch and forget. Don't let these words fade into the background noise of your life. The difference between a dreamer and a doer is what happens in the next 10 minutes. I want you to think of one failure you are currently carrying, one setback that has been making you feel small or ashamed. I want you to perform that failure audit we talked about. Strip away the ego. Stop blaming the world. Ask yourself, what is the data here? What is this failure trying to teach me? And then, I want you to commit to one micro win today. Not tomorrow. Not Monday. Today. Write that one page. Make that one call. Go for that 10-minute walk. Prove to your brain that you are back in the arena. If this journey through the wisdom of Martin Meadows has shifted something inside you, if it has given you even a single spark of hope or a new perspective on your struggles, then I invite you to join our community. Here at the Universe of Book, we don't just summarize chapters. We look for the keys to a better life. Every book we explore is a new tool in your arsenal, a new way to understand yourself and the world around you. Please, hit that like button. It helps us reach more people who might be sitting in their own valley of despair right now. needing to hear this message. Subscribe to the universe of book and turn on notifications so you never miss a chance to grow with us. And most importantly, I want to hear from you. Comment below and tell me, what is the biggest lesson you've learned from a failure in your past? Your story might be the exact thing someone else needs to read to keep going. Remember, the road from failure to success is never a straight line. It is jagged, it is messy, and it is often exhausting. But it is the only road worth traveling. You have the map, you have the tools, and most importantly, you have the strength. Now, go out there and fail your way to greatness.